Hello everybody, welcome back to Inspirational Landscapes. I'm Peter Knight and I want to say something more about the geography in Inspirational Landscapes. Now, partly this follows from a student query in the last live session about what the key themes of this module really are, and partly it follows from student response to a throwaway comment that I made in the live session about me being a former geographer. And I said that I love my geography, but I'm not always sure about geographers. So I just thought I should maybe explain a little bit more about both those points, the key themes of the module, and Inspirational Landscapes, geography and geographers. So the key themes of this module are basically the key themes of traditional core geography. So if you're wondering what the module's about, well, the module's about geography, but the whole point of the module is that you can apply geography to things that you're particularly interested in. I always say the whole point of this module is that it enables you to do geography to mountain biking or rock climbing or classical music or ballet or shed design, anything that you like. You can find the geography in it. So the themes that we work through and focus on within the module aren't so much topic-based themes, they're themes to do with underlying ideas that run through the whole of geography. So I'll run through some of them with you. So for example, people often say that geography is about space, place and environment. I'm going to put right up there as being the first key theme of this module, ideas about space and place. Now we approach them from all sorts of different angles. So on the one hand you've got the academic background of Ifu Tuan talking about sense of place and differences between space and place and so on. But we approach it also, for example, through the eyes of Marcel Proust in Search of Lost Time, where he's giving a different take, if you like, but a very comparable take on these relationships between people, space and place. But space and place, I'm going to take that as being our first core theme. Second core theme, again, right in the heart of geography, and it follows on from space and place. Once you have places and once you have more than one space and you're differentiating between them, then necessarily you have boundaries or frontiers, and that's another of our big theme, the idea of boundaries between spaces, places, locations, environments, geographical settings. And on the one hand, we're going to do a big case study of the American West and the transition of the frontier across the American West, looking at things like the Turner's frontier thesis and whether that still makes any kind of logical sense. Or at the other extreme, we've already talked about the boundaries between life and death, heaven and earth, our geographies and metaphysical geographies. So you can think of boundaries and frontiers at all sorts of different levels. Now I often say that the whole module is like a journey, and the first thing we did right at the beginning was talk about being lost and whether we needed maps and what our maps would look like and how we would navigate with them. So I'm going to say maps and navigation as my third big theme for the module. And again, you can come at this from different angles. You can think about Harry Beck making the London Tube map, the Underground map, or you can think about Julie Meretu, one of the artists that we've looked at, and her maps, her atlases that she built, for example, her atlases of sports stadia, which at first glance, a lot of you will have looked at and you'd have thought, well, that's not an atlas, that's not a map. But then when you look at it more closely, you realise that, well, given the way we can use it and given the intention behind it, yeah, maybe it is a map. So what are maps? How do we use them for navigation? So maps and navigation, that's my third theme. Now that leads into another of the big themes that runs through the module, and that's the idea of journeys. That's what we're using our maps, that's what we're using our navigation for. We're journeying between our spaces and our places, across our boundaries and our frontiers, and we're making journeys. I've often referred to the analogy of a road trip, and the middle section of the module is called On the Road. And I got that title from the book by Jack Kerouac. And so if you want to, you can approach it from that angle, or you can take a very different angle, and we also mentioned Amani Willett and his very different viewpoint on the idea of the great American road trip and how that might be perceived through different eyes. And that perceiving things through different eyes, I guess that's going to be our next big theme. But journeys is the fourth one I have on my list here. And within that theme of journeys, well, we're kind of doing lots of detours and side trips, or excursions, if you want, to different case studies. So our journeys, for example, might start and end at home, and you might now be thinking of T.S. Eliot and getting back to where we're beginning and knowing the place for the first time, or there are many geographies of home, formal academic geographies looking at the idea of home. Likewise, wilderness, if we're journeying out from home into our amorphous spaces, as Tuan would say, well, we're out there in the wilderness. What do we mean by wilderness? That's another important geographic context, and we're going to think about that not only in a geographical academic point of view, but also from the point of view, for example, of filmmakers. And when we looked recently at John Ford contrasting the wilderness against home, we're going to look at some more westerns later on, talking about that relationship between wilderness and home. And as part of that, those excursions we've been taking in the on the road section of the module, we've looked at a variety of different case study environments, if you like. For example, the glaciers case study that we had just recently. So we've got space and place, we've got boundaries and frontiers, we've got maps and navigation, and we've got journeys. And on those journeys, one of the main things that I'm trying to get you to do in this module is to recognise the importance of perspective and the importance of points of view. And you might revert back to Proust for that. Remember, he said that the only true voyage of discovery consists not in seeing new places, but in seeing through new eyes. That's one of Proust's big points. Or if you want to come at it from a more academic geography point of view, then you can go back to our conversations earlier, and hopefully the experimental travel exercises that you've done related to the work of D.W. Meinig, who said that you could stand 10 people in front of a landscape and show them the view, and they would all see different things because of their different backgrounds, their different perspectives. So perspective and point of view, and the way that what you see depends on where you're looking from, that's our next big theme. And finally, I put art, science, geography in there, that overlap, the fact that geography is at that overlap between art and science, and that we can approach it from different points of view. Within this module, we're getting a lot of geographical perspectives, but also before the end of the module, we'll make sure that we step back and add in some very specifically artists' perspectives on the landscapes that we've been thinking about, and these big ideas that we've introduced from a geographical point of view. And we've already encountered some examples of art, science, geography overlaps, whether you want to think about the glacier ballet that we watched earlier, or the Cape Farewell exercises, expeditions, or the wide range of environmental art that I know some of you are particularly interested in. So there's a bunch of core themes running through the module there: space and place, boundaries, frontiers, maps, navigation, journeys, perspective and points of view, and that overlap between art, science, geography. I would say those are at the heart of the module in terms of big themes. And what those are all wrapped up in is the idea of finding the geography in whatever you're interested in. So I keep saying this module doesn't have to be about what I'm interested in. Inevitably, what I deliver to you within the sessions relates to things I know about, or that I'm interested in, that I think will be important for you. But what really matters is that you take those and run with them and find your own examples, your own case studies, and apply what I've said to those. And I don't even mean you have to agree with what I've said and do what I'm saying with your examples. You can completely disagree with what I'm saying, and you can think my examples are awful and go and do something different to your own different examples, but just being aware that you're doing something in opposition to what I'm doing, and that can be the point of it, if you like. And part of that finding the geography in your mountain biking or in your ballet or whatever it might be, is that you can choose what to notice about the world around you. And we're locked in early on into this habit of noticing what we've been taught is important, but it's really important. And the biggest thing in this module is for you to find your own ways of noticing things that matter to you, and to some extent taking that artist's perspective is one of the things that will help us to do that as we move on through towards the end of the module. So that's about the key themes of the module. In that context, having happily identified what I think are the key themes of this module and underpinning themes of geography, it may well be that some of you were looking at that and saying, well, that's not geography, that's not what I think of as geography. I'm more interested in, why didn't he say more about the feminist perspective? Why didn't he say more about some particular cultural geography angle? Why isn't he saying more about volcanoes? You will all have your own take on what geography is, what geography comprises, what the relative importance of different things in geography are. That's great. Geography is massive, and that's part of its fun. But I said as a throwaway comment in the one of the live sessions, I said that I describe myself as a former geographer. I was a little bit tongue-in-cheek to see what you said about that, and it did raise a couple of comments. So, am I a geographer? I guess is the question to answer at this point, given that we're teaching a geography geography degree and doing a geography module. Well, I worked out on counted back on my fingers through the years, and I've been officially designated and defined and described as a geographer. If you go all the way back to making choices at A level and so on, I've officially been defined as a geographer since 1975, and I still am officially defined as a geographer. So in that sense, yes, I'm a geographer. My training, my inclination, my background, my interest, all lies within what I think of as geography. Now, here's an interesting thing. Over the many years, the many decades that I've been doing geography, as in anything in life, stuff changes. And I don't mean that I'm changing and that my views are changing. What I mean is that things change around you. So the definition of geography, the content of geography, the scope of geography, the boundaries between geography and other disciplines over the course of time have moved. Much in the same way that Turner's frontier thesis says, well, the frontier moves across the United States, and in doing so, areas that used to be out in the wilderness beyond the frontier suddenly become frontier towns, and then suddenly they're civilized on the right side of the frontier after the frontier has passed by. Or for the physical geographers amongst you, I often talk about the advance and retreat of glacier margins. And at one point a location is proglacial, then the glacier margin comes along and that point is now ice marginal, then the glacier margin continues and this location is now subglacial, then the glacier retreats again, it becomes ice marginal, then it becomes proglacial again. So this location isn't changing, but things are changing around it. The boundaries are moving around this static point, so the characteristics of that point change through time by definition against that boundary. So when I say, well, am I still a geographer or am I a former geographer, I'm not necessarily saying that I've changed, but I'm asking you whether you think geography has changed over that time, and where does that leave things on either side of that boundary. And geography has changed, partly through, one of the big things that changes it in disciplines such as geography is the technology. Like in 1970, well, you can go back and look up the technology from 1975 and imagine what I was doing as a geographer then in terms of GIS and computer-based cartography, etc., of which there was none at that point. So things have changed, but also things have changed in terms of the people who make up the discipline. And for many disciplines, including geography, the people that are in there, that's one of the key determinants of what the discipline is. It isn't just the technology, it's also the people and their ideas, and the ideas that they've brought with them if they've come in from other disciplines. And this is something that does apply particularly to geography, that it's a discipline that is so wide-ranging, so holistic in its approach, that it has traditionally been very welcoming to academics, scientists, social scientists from outside of geography in other disciplines to come in and work within geography departments. Nowadays universities tend not to have such tightly defined departments. They don't have a geography department, they have, as we do, a department of geography, geology and the environment. And within those bigger departments, or those bigger schools, certainly, over the last 20, 30 years, increasingly geography has been taught by people whose background, early background, back in the 1960s and 70s, wasn't at that point geography, and they moved into geography from outside. Now there are some brilliant advantages to that we're importing skills, knowledge, expertise, attitudes, approaches from outside the discipline. And like we've been saying for the whole of this module, that's great, seeing geography through different eyes. Well, the great way to do that is to involve other people from outside and put them in the discipline and incorporate them within the discipline. On the other hand, that does necessarily change what geography becomes if the people who are doing it are now different kinds of people with different kinds of backgrounds and different kinds of ideas. I'm not saying it's good or it's bad, but I'm reminding you now of the object and the advancing and retreating frontiers of the boundaries of a discipline. If that used to be geography and that used to be something else and something is here in geography, and that boundary shifts or elements are moved around across these spaces, places, across these boundaries, well then the nature of any one location changes. And so over the course of time, one activity or set of characteristics might at some point be firmly within the realm of geography, It might at another point, because the boundaries, the characteristics of geography have changed, that same thing might fall outside of the boundaries of geography. And if there's a steady, long-term change in a discipline, then things can be overtaken, overwhelmed and buried, or they can be left behind and lost in the distance, like the dinosaurs. So it's quite difficult to be sure over an extended period of time with such a complex discipline as geography as to exactly what is where in terms of these boundaries, and that is something which I'm not going to give you a clear and definite answer to. I'm not going to tell you whether I'm well, I am. I do describe myself as a geographer, but I'm going to leave you to decide whether or not that's still a valid definition. But you can only do that, going back to the top of my list earlier, by looking at what I've said these core themes of geography are, and whether you agree with that, or alternatively whether no, we're missing the point and that isn't geography or isn't geography anymore, and secondly whether you agree that where I am, where this module is, what we're doing does indeed belong with those themes, or those themes do belong with what we're doing. So that's what I meant when I cast doubt for a moment on the idea of geography, geographers. Basically, I'm saying things change through time, and you have to be very careful in maintaining the accuracy and the precision of your definitions of them. So geography is a slippery subject, and you just need to keep your eye on it. And one of the great things about this module is it allows you to be operating right at the outer boundaries. If there is an outer boundary of geography, this is the module that gives you the opportunity to do that. And so my kind of parting advice to you for this session would be take advantage of that opportunity and push your geography right out to the extreme, and have a good close look at what you think are the boundaries or the outer reaches of what really is a fantastic discipline.